Welcome to Sew Very Easy. My name is Laura, and last month we covered a paper bag skirt pattern, and the techniques are good for any size. We did use a McCall's pattern, and that pattern also has the pattern pieces for a pair of pants. We're going to talk about the grain lines and the importance of the direction of our sewing. The paper bag skirt that we made last month was from McCall's pattern M7942. It also has a pair of pants, and it's the same paper bag pant. So we're going to be able to use that pocket technique and the same elastic top. Most pattern pieces will have a line running through the center that will actually say grain line. They have them in the pockets, the pants front and back, and even accessories like this tie that goes on the front. These grain lines help us to take these pattern pieces and lay it on our fabric. If we lay the pattern anywhere we want on the fabric and that grain line is not straight, the pants or the garment will hang differently. One side might be a little droopy, the other one might be higher. It'll be uncomfortable and tight in one area and loose in another. So that grain line does play an important part. I'm going to explain grain lines on this little mini bolt of fabric. When you buy fabric, it comes on a bolt or a roll, and you would buy the length that you need. It doesn't matter how long it is, this is always considered the length. The width of the fabric is the distance from that finished end all the way over to that finished end. So we have the width of fabric, and that width of fabric can vary depending on your fabric. 45 inches and 60 inches are common widths of fabric. The strongest grain line is the line that is running down the length of the fabric. There's very, very little give. It's the strongest of the grain lines. The grain line that goes along the width of the fabric is a little bit more stretchy. And then that 45 has a lot of stretch and give to it. When we have a pattern that refers to the grain line, it refers to that longest line, the strongest grain of the fabric. The pattern pieces do give you recommended ways of laying out your pattern pieces on top of your fabric, and it will follow the grain lines. The easiest grain line to find is that grain line along those selvage edges. And since we need to cut 2 pieces of the front and 2 pieces of the back, we can cut the fabric together. I would highly recommend that you have your fabric so the right sides are touching, and that's going to save you a step when we go forward. So with the fabric right sides together, we can line up this selvage edge. Smooth out the fabric, and I like to keep that selvage straight. So if you have a mat that you can use, that's very helpful. Some fabric is very soft and you can bend it, and that's going to put the grain line off. You can use the edge of a table or a mat to keep that selvage straight. And then smooth out the fabric so there's no wrinkles. This grain line down the center of the pair of pants means that grain line is going to go down the center front of your leg. And that strongest grain line is important to have it running in this direction. That leaves the grain line that's coming across the body a little bit more stretchy, which means it's going to be more comfortable and you're going to be able to bend better. And then you have that 45-degree angle. We need that stretchy 45-degree angle so that we can sit and bend. So we need this line equal to this line. Once we have established the distance, put a little pin to hold this grain line down. From here, we're going to be able to pivot this tissue so that we can have the same equal distance. So I can put whatever measuring stick I'm going to use and then slide it so that line is the same, and put another pin. From here, we're going to be able to take that measurement and make sure that that's the same distance along this selvage. Now we have the strongest grain line coming down the front center of our pants. pin our pant pattern onto our fabric. And you can remove the center pins because you're not needing them to cut out the fabric. Once we know they're straight, then just pin. We do have a grain line on that pocket. So this is the strongest part of the fabric, which means that pocket is not going to stretch out of shape as you use it. This area we don't mind it stretching, but along that side seam, we don't want the pocket to gap open. So it's important that this edge is going along the strongest part of the grain line. The grain line for this tie is going down that longest edge. The reason is when you fold this in half and stitch this edge together, it's the strongest edge. So as you're tying this tie, it means you're not going to break threads and stretch that edge. So those are the three main grain lines for this pair of pants. So keep your grain lines straight and pin all of your pattern pieces on your fabric. And for this pattern, we need 2 fronts, 2 backs, 1 tie, and 4 pockets. As you're cutting out your pattern pieces, be sure to add your notches. The directions have us sewing the pant leg first and that crotch second. I'm going to switch them up and I'm going to do that crotch line first. And the reason is I already have the fabric pinned together. So before I take this paper off, I'm just going to pull that paper back and pin that crotch area. So we can sew this now while we already have it pinned together. I like to roll back the paper and pin my seams. By pinning and stitching this crotch line first, for fabric that looks very similar to the front and back, this assures that I get it the right way. If you have a pair of pants that has a zipper in it, you won't be able to do this. For just a drawstring or an elastic pair of pants, this is a great way to save some time. Once all my pins are there, I now will be able to remove that paper and do this technique to the front and the back. I'm still going to stitch my 5/8 seam allowance. This very curved area near the crotch line takes a lot of stress, so I'd recommend doing a second row of stitching right beside the first one, so it's going into the seam allowance. Start a couple of inches up and stitch right beside, coming right off that edge. So you can see those 2 seams right beside each other. When you're done those seams, press those seams flat. As I sew my garments, I like to finish each seam as I go along. I need to have some finishing edge on this, either a zigzag or a serge stitch. The finishing edge that I'm going to do on the pair of pants is going to be a small serge stitch. And I'm going to serge these layers together. A lot of patterns do recommend that you open up that seam flat along the front and the back. But because this is a very fine fabric and it's going to be a very loose fitting pair of pants, I'm going to serge the seams together and have them pressed to one side. So I'm going to cut off some of this fabric and serge as I go along. Now I can take this to the iron and just steam that flat. I'm going to do the same method to the front and the back. Once this seam has a nice finish and is flat, I'm going to be able to open it up and press that seam to one side. The back and the front are done, so I can match up those seams so the right sides are together. And match those 2 center seams. Once you have that center crotch pinned together, we're going to be able to pin the side. I put the pin in at the bottom first. Now I can take the crotch seam and that hem and just straighten it out. And I can pull my layers together so that all the edges match and my notches match. Having this laid out flat as you're pinning it is going to make sure that all the fabric is evenly distributed. Both those center seams are now pinned. It looks like we're going to be able to start sewing on one side and go all the way around and sew to the second side. But I would not recommend that because then the pants are not going to hang the same. The feed dogs and the presser foot work different, so we want the seams both going down. Start on one side of the seam about 2 inches. Start here and stitch all the way down. When that one seam is done, do the second seam starting at about 2 inches. So you're crossing over a seam and then all the way down the second side. With the stitching going in the same direction, the pants are just going to hang nicer. And you will end up with 2 rows of stitching, which is going to strengthen this little area. Once those inside stitches have been done, I would take time and check and make sure both the legs are the same length. If they're not, this is definitely the time to correct them. I'll take this to the iron and I'm going to press that seam flat, and then I'm going to put a finishing serged edge on, just like I did the top. Once your finishing has been done, press it flat and then press it to one side. So I have the front and the back done and this center done. Now I get to add my pockets on and finish stitching my side seams. I'll put a link in the description to the last video where we did put the pockets in and finished the top off. The one thing though I would recommend is always do your stitching in the same direction. So you're going to start from the top and go down to the bottom on each side. And that's always going to keep those pants hanging the proper way. So I'm going to put the top pockets on and get the top done. By following the grain line, the pants hang nice and straight. They're not twisted in or twisted out, and that twisting in and out is very uncomfortable. And the pant hangs nice. Following that grain line for the pocket, make sure that that pocket stays nice and flat against the body and it doesn't stretch and stick out. So this keeps the pockets nice and flat towards the body, but you still have lots of room to enjoy your pockets. And that straight grain line also repeats along the back of the pant. So the back hangs nice, the sides and the front hang perfect. An elastic waistband is very easy to do and it's very comfortable. That little extra at the top and the tie give that very popular paper bag look. I'll put a link in the description to the previous pattern where we did the pockets on that skirt and we did the waistband. And as always, thank you for joining me today on Sew Very Easy. Feel free to subscribe and come on back. Let's see what we're sewing next time in the sewing room. Bye for now.